Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Excellus Blue Cross Blue Shield, working with members to find health coverage for every stage of life, helping to make care and coverage more accessible in more ways for more people across the Rochester community. Details online at excellusbcbs.com.
From WXXI News, this is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. Our connection this hour was made in the launching of yet another war. Bombs falling in foreign capitals. And maybe you're thinking of Iran, as we just discussed on Connections. Maybe you're thinking of Ukraine. But the list is much longer than that. The Global Conflict Tracker reports that there are currently 50 to 130 active armed conflicts globally. And that represents the highest number of conflicts since World War II. Major wars driving instability include the conflicts in Ukraine and, yes, Iran and Gaza, Sudan, Myanmar, Syria. But it is a long list. So what is the state of the nonviolence movement? In Rochester, we have the Gandhi Institute for Nonviolence, and the Institute's annual gala, Soul Force, is coming up later in April. What do we make of the nonviolence movement in such a violent time? Our guests are here to talk about that, and let me welcome them now. Erin Thompson is Executive Director of the M.K. Gandhi Institute for Nonviolence. Welcome back to the program.
Really good to be with you, Evan.
Next to Erin is Ashwin Shah, who's a community member and a former board member for the Gandhi Institute. Thank you for being here.
Glad to be here.
And across the table, welcome to Isaiah Santiago, a commissioner of the Rochester City School District and a keynote speaker for the Gandhi Institute's Soul Force Gala coming up on Saturday, April 18th. Welcome back. It's been a little while. Nice to see you.
Great to see you again, Evan.
So, we're going to talk about Soul Force and what you got coming up here. But Erin, when I look at the list that the Global Conflict Tracker has, and they say this is the most armed active conflicts we've seen in 80 years around the world. What is the state of the nonviolence movement, and how is this happening?
Well, I think that things go in waves. Violence is cyclical. I think there are some extenuating circumstances right now, politically, and there's an approach in our government that embraces might is right. I think that's being reflected and mirrored around the world, and so violence is pretty pervasive. I also think, though, there's a sense each generation to feel like the world is on fire like it's never been before, and so some of the particulars of these conflicts change, the weapons and such. The underlying sentiment remains the same, and I think that's what we're dealing with, is that we haven't resolved this urge, this tendency to resort to violence.
I think I feel pulled in two different directions by that idea. I think the first is that I absolutely agree that we all, and I have this too, we all have recency bias. So we're very quick to say, whatever conflict, whatever social issue, whatever we're thinking of, this must be the worst it's ever been. When it most of the time is not. And it doesn't mean that issues aren't serious, and of course they are. But the context of history is sometimes lost in the recency bias. And there is some comfort in that, knowing that, that the struggle that one might feel today, they're not alone in, they're not the first to encounter. And yet at the same time, I think about sort of political and social prognostication from 35 years ago. It's the end of the Cold War. Francis Fukuyama writes The End of History, and he posits that we're reaching a different age in which pluralistic government is going to rule. There will be conflicts, but they won't be the major wars that we've seen in the past because global partnership will reign. And boy, I'm oversimplifying Fukuyama, and that's not fair to him, but boy, do I wish that were correct.
Right.
And it's amazing to be sitting here in 2026 feeling like the world really might be on fire.
Right.
And how silly it feels. And so in that, let me ask you a question. I hear the president's advisors, people like Stephen Miller, say, well, what we've learned is that it's the law of the wild.
Right.
It's kill or be killed. Might does make right. And sometimes a peaceful, strong nation has to use its might to exert its will.
Yeah.
And I wonder, I mean, I don't think that you share that lesson, but that lesson's pretty common these days among leadership, isn't it?
Certainly among the current leadership. And yeah, I think that is the law of the jungle. I don't know if that's something that we've learned. I think it's something that we have reverted to, maybe are devolving down into, and unabashedly so. I think there's intentionality around that stance. That is the reality that we are contending with right now. I think that we haven't learned the lessons of history adequately, which in part is why I think that the nonviolence movement is alive and well. It is, it's urgently important in this moment in time, and I think that we have work to do in terms of all pulling together so that our efforts don't feel fragmented.
Who are the leaders in the nonviolence movement around the world right now that you point to and say, we should all be following in these footsteps?
It's an interesting question. And I'm actually going to approach it from a different angle, if you will. When I think about a nonviolence movement, I think one of the traps that we fall into is feeling like we need to wait for a hero to get behind. Mm-hmm. And that leads to inaction. It leads to, it eliminates our sense of agency. A lot of the work that we try and do at the Gandhi Institute is working locally, starting small, leveraging the tools that we have as individuals and as communities, and then naturally snowballing that upward and making that the focus for people who want to begin to make an impact. So yeah, it's, I guess the short answer is that I don't have a short list of global leaders per se.
But there doesn't have to be a Mandela and a king in 2026 per se, because the power is truly with the people in a sense.
It has to.
Is that where you are?
Indeed. And it always has been with the people. It's a matter of us waking up to that, equipping ourselves with the tools to take advantage of the power that we have and acting in concert.
So let's go around the table, and then we're going to talk about Soulforce coming up here. But Ashwin Shah, who's a community member and a former board member, does the world feel more fraught to you today than it did when you were younger? Or are there echoes and parallels that you feel?
I still feel strongly that nonviolence still has a strongest possibility, regardless of what we experience, what is going on in the world, because the results that we see, even including the current Iran war, whether we as Americans going in there and bombing and Iran defending themselves, if you really look at both of them, neither one of them are happy. There is no harmony. There is tremendous fragmentation as a result of violence. And at the same token, if you take the nonviolence example from the history, whether you take Mahatma Gandhi or Nelson Mandela or Dr. King, they all fought nonviolently, but at the end, they brought the community together. They eliminated some inequality. They helped reduce poverty. They helped educate more and more people at higher level. And if you really look at the cross-section of the society is doing a lot better in that sense, economically, financially. Now, coming back to what you just suggested, in order to practice nonviolence, one must first know that the peace and nonviolence begins with me. I am the most responsible for making it happen. And if everybody feels that way, and if we can get that message out to people, that peace begins with me, I think we will have a significant change and so much faster.
You still believe that?
I strongly believe that, yes.
Well, Isaiah Santiago is here. Commissioner, I want to ask you a little bit about what you're going to be talking about. You're the keynote speaker at the upcoming Soul Force Gala. Mm-hmm. So as someone who's kind of come up in the ranks of politics at a pretty young age compared to a lot of the people who enter at a time when people are feeling cynical about a lot of leadership, what does nonviolence mean to you in 2026?
To me, in 2026, nonviolence, as both of our co-panelists have said, it's something that is decided within the person. I think right now we see pressure throughout the world. We see the conflicts rise. And it's important for the people, for the community, for people around the world during this time, although it's extremely hard, not to lose hope, but to hope more. Not to lose the thought of humanity and the honesty of humanity, but to raise the standard of it, because during this time, I think part of the attack is to remove that from our everyday thinking, to remove that and to replace that with fear. And I think it's most important right now for us to raise the standard of what humanity is. And so it is a decision within the community, and it is a decision within the people. And as we see, even within our country, as far as things that are being funded by our country, things that are being accepted by our country, if the people, if the voters, if the people who are voting the people in stand and say that we are not accepting this anymore, the elected leaders have no other choice but to follow that. And if they don't, there's a decision with community leaders and community members to decide whether or not they're going to vote these people back in.
Can I ask you, I actually would love to hear from all of you on this idea, but I want to know if you accept the idea that war is a natural state for humans or that violence is a natural state. I was thinking about a conversation we had yesterday, of all things, with an astrophysicist. And astrophysicist Adam Frank was talking to me about this new movie, Project Hail Mary, which becomes a space buddy movie between a human being and an alien that he finds in space. And they're both desperate to save their own planets. But they're not out to kill each other. They're not to steal each other's resources. They end up partnering really beautifully. And it tells kind of a contrary story to what we typically hear from Hollywood. Hollywood typically tells us that when you find something in space, it's there to eat you or kill you. And you need to fear it. And I asked Adam Frank about that, and he said, that's a lot of the projection of our own fears. And fear is very powerful. Mm-hmm. But the idea that it's always just the law of the jungle or it's only kill or be killed does not necessarily have to be the law of the universe. And that might be just a projection of human fear, which is natural, but maybe overstated. So in other words, it might not just be the natural state to always be at war or to gravitate toward war or violence, or maybe it is. I wonder what you think about that.
I think that it shouldn't be. And even if we consider it law or we consider it natural, it doesn't mean that it is all right or it's okay. We see during the time of Dr. Martin Luther King advocating and fighting for the civil rights movement, segregation was a law. Under the federal government, it was all right for this to happen. And now that we look in retrospective, we're like, no, that was never all right.
Right.
But it shows how things that we might think or that the general population might think is all right doesn't mean that it is morally okay. Doesn't mean that it's taken into consideration humanity and the people that are affected by these decisions. The war in Iran, the war in Israel, the war in Palestine, the war in all these spaces, there are human lives that are being lost. And at the end of the day, that's never all right. And no matter what the natural state of mind is, or no matter what the law is, we cannot normalize it, because when we normalize it is when we lose. And so it's important, like I said, a little bit earlier, for us to really raise the standard of humanity to say that this is not all right.
Ashwin, can you jump in there too? Do you think war and violence is more the natural state of man, or is peace more the natural state? I say man, humankind.
Yeah, humankind, right. I strongly believe that human nature is divine. It's all good. Human nature is made up of goodness. It is the understanding and ignorance that we are really fighting over, or which creates the problem. Human nature naturally is good, because if you look at the national or international level, if you keep that aside, at human level, every society, every country has made a progress. There are more good people than bad people, or there are more understanding people than ignorant people. With that, I would say that human goodness or divine nature of human beings is very natural. That to look for good. Everybody, if you really look at it overall, any family, any individual, any human being, what are the normal objectives in their life? They want to live peacefully, they want to live safely, and they want to do everything for their children, education, everything, so that they can live a better life than I'm living. And at the end of the day, all that amounts to happiness. That's what everybody wants. So nonviolence methods are the only method that can take us there, take the whole communities there, take the whole nations there. And if I may further state, since we are a capitalistic society, let me connect the nonviolence to capitalism. If you really take any city in our country, if there is complete safety, security, and there is zero violence, then if you tie it to the economy, the insurance rates will go down. People will feel more safe to invest money in the communities. There'll be more jobs created where people live. All this is effect of nonviolence, if we can get there. But it has a direct relationship to the capitalism, economic well-being of the people. So to me, nonviolence is the only way that we can get out of all this mess that we are in right now.
Erin, what's the natural state of humans?
I think that, I distinguish violence from war. So I think that anger...
What do you mean by that?
War is a result of decisions being made about how to engage an opponent.
Yeah.
I think that anger and violence are natural impulses. They're part of the human experience. It's not something that we're going to eliminate from our makeup. I think what is both the privilege and responsibility of consciousness is that we have the opportunity to choose how we respond to these urges and impulses. So I think that, folks who make the argument that war is the natural state are not taking accountability for the decisions that were made to rely on war, kind of this most blunt of objects to resolve differences. I think also that the conversation about what violence is needs to expand. People think of, violence in kinetic terms, people fighting each other and such, and not tending to look at the systemic aspects of violence, which are also a series of decisions that we make about how we organize living with one another.
But if Ashwin is correct that, and I think he is, to say the commonality of the human experience across borders is that most people want a peaceful life. Most people want a better life for their children than themselves. Most people want to contribute to a peaceful society. I think those are statements that are true across borders and across time.
Right.
How can that be the case, and yet we have dozens of active wars, dozens of conflicts on fire? Distinguish for me the individual desire or even the collective desire for peace and either the systems or the powers that push us toward violence or war or conflict.
Yeah. I would start with fear, a scarcity mindset, and a lack of a developed, robust set of tools to respond to conflict that have accumulated over time. And now find themselves represented in the highest offices of our governments, with people making decisions that are operating from those frames of mind.
I take that point, and it's also at a time when we're a month into yet another war of choice in the Middle East. It is worth noting that whatever anybody thinks of President Trump, he ran the campaign in 2024 on a no more new wars platform, and it was very popular. I have spoken to some of his supporters who he has lost because of the wars that they've started. And He's threatened war in Greenland. He's engaged in wars in South America, in the Middle East. But, Erin, part of the support for President Trump, certainly not all of it, but part of it, was on this idea that I'm going to believe that he's less likely to take us into more new war. He's stating it bluntly. The value of no more of this stuff, no more bloodshed on foreign lands. And yet now we've got more wars going now than at any recent presidency. To me, obviously, you can debate how genuine the president was in his campaign, or you could say, systemically, we are pushed towards war. We are pushed toward violence from some forces that are bigger than any one individual. Which one is that to you? Which one holds more weight to you?
What was option A?
So the president wasn't genuine during his campaign about wanting to avoid war.
Yeah, I think we can underscore that. That's his support. I don't think from his core base has really wavered, despite his backtracking on almost every campaign promise, in some form or fashion. Aside from the us and them sort of frame that he tends to operate from, which is resonating with people who are feeling uncertain or who are feeling fear, who are looking for something to gravitate toward that's strong, that's secure. They have found this in, Trump and kind of this cult of personality that he has. Yeah.
So let's kind of put a pin in all this, because we've been kind of taking a look at the world as it is now from the perspective of people who work in nonviolence. And just for a moment, I want to talk about what's coming up locally here. On April 18th, Saturday, April 18th, you got a very important event.
We do.
And it's called Soul Force. And what is it, Erin?
So Soul Force is our annual gala, spring gala fundraiser, our premier fundraiser / friend-raising event for the Gandhi Institute. And this is an opportunity, this particular instance of it's going to be our 35th year of existence, being founded in 1991. We're marking 35 years. We've been active in Rochester here since 2007, and we are looking to pull together our community to celebrate our wins, to renew, recommit, and resist, which are the themes of Soul Force this year, together as community, and to help fund and map out peacemaking here locally in Rochester for hopefully the next 35 years more.
How do people get involved? How do people attend?
Through our website, GandhiInstitute.org. You can secure tickets for Soul Force. You can sign on as a financial sponsor. You can volunteer with the Gandhi Institute. Stop by the Institute if you like also, 929 South Plymouth Ave. We love walk-ins and to be able to kind of show the space to our community members and talk shop.
Why did you invite the commissioner to give a keynote?
So Mr. Santiago is a remarkable peacemaker and community member, and I've had the pleasure of knowing him since he was a little bit younger than he is now. Back in his School of the Arts days, when he was a social entrepreneur and media personality and a peacemaker. And, he got our attention through his work in the community, grassroots work. The Gandhi Institute extended a Youth Healing Hate grant to Isaiah that he made use of. And the Youth Healing Hate grant program is one that funds are provided to local youth who are challenged to use their creativity and their outlook to create solutions to incivility and hate locally in their own community. And Isaiah was one of those recipients. We've stayed in touch in the intermittent years. He's participated in a podcast. We've watched his political trajectory with great interest and applause and appreciation. And he's just, he's a product of, he's from Rochester City Schools, Rochester political scene. And he's a young person, even today. He exemplifies, what we hope to do with doing our part to help plant the seeds of nonviolence and then watching them bloom. So there was no one else we could have had as our keynote for this year.
Do you have a sense of what you're going to talk about?
I have some of a sense of what I'm going to speak about, but of course, I have a great gratitude to the Gandhi Institute. Back when I was 16, I started the We Got This organization or campaign to combat youth gun violence. And I wrote a proposal to the Gandhi Institute, and we were able to bring young people into the recording studio and bringing them out of street life, drug violence, gang violence, and the Gandhi Institute was a big part in funding that program, and it was a successful program. And so I am still preparing what I'm going to speak about. I'm preparing.
Well, I'm not asking you for all the spoilers.
Right. Come down. Come to the gala and come in and listen. I promise you it won't be anything boring. I am a pretty good speaker, I believe.
Isaiah, you're many things, but you ain't boring. Having known you for years. But let me also ask you, you first make contact with this organization in your teenage years. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you run for and become the youngest school board member. Mm-hmm. You're trying to serve the community from a place of personal experience, and from my perspective, having talked to you during your campaign and during your work, trying to represent an authentic voice that can be seen as credible. Mm-hmm. And credibility is not easily gained, especially among people who feel nihilism, who feel left out or, frankly, oppressed, whatever the case is. Mm-hmm. So credibility is hard to build. Mm-hmm. How have you tried to maintain it? How do you, now that you're serving as a commissioner, how do you maintain credibility with young people who don't always feel like the adults and the leaders in our society and in their community have their best interest at heart?
Well, just being authentically me. And I'll say a lot of times people ask me, what's one of your proudest accomplishments? And for me, it's just remaining Isaiah Santiago through all of these years, through politics, through the effects of politics, through the work that I've done since 16, 15 years old. It's just being authentically Isaiah Santiago. But with that, also being open-minded, listening to our young people from where they are, meeting them where they're at, and being able to have those conversations with them that other people aren't willing to have, and even listening to the criticisms that other people may not be ready to listen to. And so that's part of the way that you remain credible, is by not being afraid of the criticisms that your constituents or that the people that you serve may have, making the necessary changes for that, but most of all, always remaining true to the mission and to the work which I have fought to do and have fought to be done, still fighting for mental health, still fighting for restorative practices, which ties into our nonviolence talk, still fighting into ensuring that our young people's well-being is taken care of in our RCSD. We see academic numbers, and yes, that's important, but if we're not focused on the well-being of our students first, we have an issue. And so I've remained very steadfast. I remain very solid on the things I've stood for since I was 15 years old all the way up to now. And I'm most grateful and most proud to still be the same Isaiah Santiago. Of course, I've matured, from 16, 15 years old now to 21. But I'm grateful to still live with those experiences. And I'm also somebody who comes into the space with lived experience, like you said, growing up in 14621, one of the poorest zip codes in this country, and still being able to make it out and understanding that there's a lot of young people in the city of Rochester who has that same possibility. They just need the resources for that. They just need the community. They need the leaders who can stand up for them. And so that's a long answer to your question.
No, it's a really good answer. And you mentioned taking criticism. Mm-hmm. We never really get criticized on the show because it's really 500 hours of perfection every year, as you know. No, listen, we get plenty of criticism. People love to let me know what they think we've done wrong, which, by the way, I've learned over time is really good for me.
Yeah.
Most of the time, it's really well intended, and it makes the show better. It makes me better, makes me stronger. I appreciate hearing you say, as a commissioner and as a leader in the community, criticism can make you better. Mm-hmm. One of the things I worry about is I think about what's changed in society, and take the nonviolence movement. So, Mandela spends years in prison, and he said that he read a lot of books on a lot of different subjects, and he thought a lot about what he needed to do better, and where he could criticize himself and learn and grow from. And I feel like the modern culture, the online culture, we're not reading as many books. And the online culture, especially with, the chat GPT tells you, Isaiah, you're great. Don't change. You're perfect, man. You're right in everything you've ever said. It's like we want, and any criticism becomes dangerous to us. Why do you think again, I don't want to harp on your age, but again, at 21 years old, you're a community leader. You got elected before you turned 21. Why are you able to internalize criticism? What do you do to allow that to not be a threat?
Well, because for me, it's more reflection, and like you said from Gandhi, it's taking a chance to look within, and seeing what's true and what's not true. It's also important with knowing yourself to know that, there's certain criticisms that you might get that's just totally not true to who you are.
Sure, of course.
Right. But there's also some criticisms that you might get that's like, okay, I can tighten up in this area. And you're absolutely right. And so I think for me, I've just learned to always take it as something that I can learn from. Even the criticisms that I might not find credible sometimes, there's still something that you can learn from, whether it's, okay, well, then I have to do better with educating on the work that I'm actually doing on the school board, or I got to do better with showing up in certain spaces. And so you can always find in any criticism some sort of truth. And the internal reflection is so important. And that's what Restorative Practices does, which the Gandhi Institute is currently doing in the RCSD, both at Padilla High School and Loretta Johnson Middle School. That's what social emotional intelligence does to our young people, to take some time to reflect, but to be solid within yourself, that criticism isn't something that harms you or that affects you, but criticism is something that is able to strengthen you, to build you up, and create one of the best leaders that you can possibly be.
You see restorative practices working?
I 100% see restorative practices working, both within the district, but I also had the honor to work for Center for Youth for about a couple months out in the Greece School District, where I ran a restorative center, ran a program against prevention to suspension, and I saw hand in hand on how it works with the right people, with the opportunity, because we can suspend a child and say that what you did was so wrong, and then they come back to school and go right back into the school, into the classrooms, and then that's the end. But if we give the child an opportunity to reflect, like me and you are speaking about, an opportunity to really look within themselves and learn the lesson within themselves, doesn't just help them while they're in the schools, but it helps them as they become adults. And that's our next generation, that's our future. And so as we talk about nonviolence, when we look at our future, part of getting to nonviolence is creating and allowing young people who are social and emotionally smart, allowing and creating young people who are able to reflect on their decisions and things that they are doing, because we don't see that much right now in our federal leadership, in our leadership around the world. And so it's just important that when we're talking about now, and right now is important, I mean, it's our contemporary issues, but we also have to look into the future beyond just the war in Iran, or beyond just the violence that we're seeing in Rochester right now, but how do we prevent this in our future generations?
So when we come back from our only break, you got a little taste of why Commissioner Santiago is giving the keynote at Soul Force coming up Saturday, April 18th, and the Gandhi Institute would love to see you there. It's gandhiinstitute.org is the website. When we come back, I want to talk to our guests about what they think people can do with feelings of sort of powerlessness, helplessness, despair. What do you do with that? And how does nonviolence apply at different levels of life? As we talk about these themes, we're talking to Isaiah Santiago, Commissioner of the Rochester City School District, and from the Gandhi Institute, Erin Thompson is Executive Director, and Ashwin Shah is a former board member and a community member, and we'll come right back on Connections.
Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Mary Cariola Center, proud supporter of Connections with Evan Dawson, believing an informed and engaged community is a connected one. marycariola.org. And One Rock, an alliance of regional economic development organizations, investors, and institutions committed to building Greater Rochester's economic future and driving coordinated growth. Information online at oneroc.com.
This is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. The Gandhi Institute for Nonviolence in Rochester has existed, I think Erin said 2007 in Rochester?
That's right.
And Ashwin, you were around in those early days.
Yes, indeed, I was.
And what have you seen in Rochester? What do you think the Gandhi Institute has done for this community?
Well, the initial, when Gandhi Institute moved here in 2007, University of Rochester was a big sponsor at that time. And one of the professor there, he was just driving this whole idea of relocating the Gandhi Institute from Memphis to Rochester. So that's how it came in 2007. And in 2007, one of the key to establishing the institute and the condition that was given to us at that point is, hey, first prove that there is a need for such an institute in our town. There is a need for nonviolence education. So Mr. Arun Gandhi, whom you know very well, I became very good friends with him, and he recruited me to organize several events across the town. And we organized several events. And the whole purpose of it, what the attendance is, what is the participation, and basically to convince a university that yes, there is a room for that. The community really wants it. And with that in mind, we did these functions. Each of the functions were extremely well attended. There was like no standing only room type of event, and sometimes people had to be outside and watch it on TV. Almost that kind of situation. And each event went so successful, which really convinced the university that, okay, there is a need for such an institute to be located in Rochester. That's how we came to Rochester, and started in 2007. After all those events, Mr. Gandhi developed a little more faith in me and said, okay, now you need to be part of the board also. So that's how I joined the board. Because after all this work and all that, he said, okay, you're the person who should be here. So our first group of board members and the chairperson, and you might know our first chairperson named Karen Trueheart. You might have even talked to her here. Under her leadership, our first goal was to establish the charter, mission, how we are going to work, and basically how to promote nonviolence in our community, and how to build the organization structurally. And I'm sure you know Kit Miller quite well.
Of course.
Our board, our first big accomplishment was we hired Kit Miller to be the director of Gandhi Institute. And then she served more than 10 plus years, I think.
Over 15. Yeah.
15 years. So that is how the whole program became reality. And then it just developed and grew. And one of the main things that really helped is we constantly did programs to increase the awareness in our community. And this program does that too today, is bring the awareness amongst the community as to what is available, what Gandhi Institute is, how good a resource it is, and then people can tap into that resource. And ultimately, it's an awareness about not only Institute, but about the principles of nonviolence, which ultimately people get more appreciation for and start following it. So that's kind of our goal, and I think we are definitely making progress on that front.
So in this community, there are plenty of people listening today who might feel, for various reasons, a sense of despair or a little bit of helplessness. What do you do with that feeling, Erin Thompson, if you're feeling like, okay, I'm hearing the tenets of nonviolence, I feel like I would naturally gravitate toward that, but this is a very violent world right now, and it's hard to feel optimism. It's hard to feel like I do have any power.
Yeah.
What do you want people to do with that feeling?
Find some community that is going to show you the opposite to be true. And that's the community that we build. We actively build that community at the Gandhi Institute. This term community building kind of gets thrown around, but we are intentionally bringing people together to cultivate this sense of agency based in real steps that people can take. So it's kind of a hope factory, essentially. I encourage folks to find their community. Join us at the Gandhi Institute. We can't necessarily as individuals dictate federal policy and so we're pulling our hair out about all the news that's being reported and whatnot. We have considerable agency over what happens locally, the most power and agency over what we ourselves do. So we have to stay in the fight first off. So that means sustaining ourselves, maintaining ourselves, and that takes intentionality. So there are things that people can do to breathe through these challenges continue to sustain their spirit first and foremost. So there's different exercises that folks can do, meditation, different somatic work, grief circles, which is something that the Institute offers. We also hold what are called community roundtables, which are opportunities for folks who have strong ideas about the direction that we're heading in, things they're trying to sort out concerning violence versus nonviolence. These roundtables are a workshop and an opportunity for people to air those ideas out, be in community with people who might take the polar opposite view and have a conversation that stays respectful, that stays curious, and that identifies through lines that sometimes turns people who are considering themselves kind of polar opposites at the outset to collaborators. And all of that happens locally. And, it's amazing what results from some of these interactions that we facilitate and foster out of the Gandhi Institute. Yeah.
Do you find that the organization is easier to reach than most people think? I mean, you're talking about forming community when a lot of people feel they don't have a lot of community, but people also feel like they don't have a lot of time. Volunteering is difficult.
Yep.
Getting outside of your routine is difficult.
Yeah.
What would you say to people who maybe have never interacted with you before?
We try to make it easy. So there are different online offerings, and our community garden is a real easy on-ramp for folks who want to kind of get a sense for how and what we do things around the Gandhi Institute. It's an inviting space. It's open to the public. We encourage folks to come by, especially as the weather starts to warm. And you're likely to find someone who is at least curious as you are, if not further along in their walk toward nonviolence. So starting a conversation is easy, and that's by design, that's by intention. We want to be as accessible as we possibly can.
I heard you say that occasionally there's value in sitting down when you have someone with a polar opposite view of you,
Yeah.
and being able to do that respectfully.
Uh-huh.
Now, that is a general statement. I know you're not talking about any one specific issue or idea or point of disagreement.
Mm.
But one thing I do hear, especially in the last decade, is that sometimes ideas should not be respected, or that people do need to be told in no uncertain terms the harm they might be causing with their ideas or with their vote or whatever the case is. And there are debates about, do you cut off family members? We see families fractured in ways that I didn't see when I was growing up. We see communities and friendships fractured.
Right.
So take me through, how you, because again, we're not talking about any one specific thing.
Sure.
But in general,
Yeah.
Are we fracturing too often on disagreement, you think?
I think that we don't have a lot of resilience in general to be confronted by difficult ideas. But I think there's a difference between candor and malicious and acting maliciously. So some folks will say that that there's no idea that is out of bounds, and that kind of anything goes in dialogue. And I don't think that's the case. I think that ideas that attack another person's right to exist, their core identity, these are positions that are toxic and undercut, the ability for real discourse to take place. And so I'm not an absolutist where the idea of, sitting at a table with a person sharing opposite views is always the best thing. You know, there's a qualitative aspect to the dialogue.
Okay,
That's
but if
necessary.
you sense that someone is doing so in good faith, there's a difference between sensing real malice.
For sure. Yeah. I think cultivating a sense of curiosity about what is the reason for a person holding a position is part of the work that we strive to embody and to teach others to do, because it allows us to be in a space where, you know, before just simply reacting, but, you know, based on the shock that one might feel, you know, we're able to pause and think that there's a reason that this person reached this position through their lived life experience. There's something there, and if we're able to kind of stay in the fire, kind of stay in that conversation, we might be able to get to the root of that and recognize that it's not hate that they're necessarily feeling.
And just briefly, as an extension of that, I think social media has convinced more of us in recent years to say, so let's just take war. So let's say for a moment, hypothetically, that you oppose the war in Iran and that you don't think that the bombing campaign is going to produce lasting peace, et cetera. And someone in your circle is full-throatedly in favor of it and is posting about it and is cheering it. And then a month later they say, I think I was wrong. Like I don't think this position is the right one to take. I think social media has convinced us to say, like, well, where have you been? You know, like, too late.
Yeah.
You know, I've been in the right tent and you haven't been in it. Like, you know, you don't get to come in now. And I don't know that that's helpful. I wonder how you feel.
I bet you Isaiah, as a younger person engaged in social media, has some ideas. But yeah, I think that it's you know, our worst sides of ourselves come out on social media.
Yeah.
That's kind of it's whipped up this cutthroat sort of you know, environment where it's difficult for a person to backtrack, to acknowledge that they were wrong. You know, there's this idea, once it's on the internet, it's forever. And so people, you know, so yeah, being very mindful, you know, offering some grace and I think it's possible for us to reform some of these norms in the social media space, but we're going to have to be the example though, you know?
Yeah, mostly I think social media is terrible, but maybe it's reformable. How do you see that, Isaiah?
Social media will be as good as the users at the
Okay.
end of the day. And so I think it's just important during these times that, you know, it's understood that social media is social media. And there are people on there who have total opposite views, and sometimes that's okay and sometimes that's not. And so I think that we have reached a very polarizing time, and that separates us so much when we're more in common than we are not.
I'm with you. I just think if I were sitting here in person and you and I disagreed on something, I might say to you, interesting, tell me why you disagree. And if we disagree on social media, I might say to you, interesting, why are you bad?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like it's different incentives.
Yeah.
It creates these weird versions of ourselves. Ashwin, do you think we're too fractured in terms of families, friendships over disagreements these days?
Yes, I would say yes, and we have become too much of an individualistic society, and self-interest or my interest is the only important thing. And other person's interest, I may hear about it, not hear about it, but that selfish component, individualistic component, and I might add a materialistic component. All those things have really, really separated us. And in order to get back to the better norms or better normals, like Isaiah said, that we really need to distinguish between good and bad, whether it's social media, regular opportunities, anything. And then when we can distinguish between good and bad, educate ourselves to understand that. And then you see a greater value in unity than being divided. That's when we can considerably see a progress in that direction. But we are divided right now, but we can get back to unity by better understanding and communication.
Erin?
You know, I think we're reaching a point in the evolution of online communications with the advent of AI, and you can't tell what's real, what's up or down.
Indeed.
Echo chambers and such that occur online. I think we're going to reach a point where face-to-face communicating, neighbor to neighbor, person to person, without a screen to mediate, is going to surge. I think there are going to be folks who are recognizing the ancient original technologies that we were born with are the ones that we really need to get back to, and I think that's going to benefit us in so many ways.
If you could take maybe 40 seconds or so as we wrap here, what would you say to somebody who thinks, look, I want peace for everybody. There are times where the only way to get there is war. Bombs may be the only way to convince somebody. Peace can be achieved through violence. I don't like it, but sometimes violence is necessary. What do you say to that?
I think that any quote-unquote peace achieved through violence is necessarily short-term. It doesn't actually address the underlying relationship, and violence begets violence. I would encourage people to consider the steps that they might take. I would encourage them to consider the steps they can take in their own lives to deepen their embrace of nonviolence.
Your predecessor, Kit's been here many times. You've been here a number of times. I always feel kind of refreshed in talking to the folks from the Gandhi Institute. It's always a powerful conversation. And listeners, they would love to see you there. Saturday, April 18th. Soulforce is coming up. GandhiInstitute.org for more information. And you can maybe hang out with some really cool people. Erin Thompson, great to see you.
Thank you so much, Evan. The staff and board will be there on the 18th.
Executive Director Erin Thompson. Isaiah Santiago, Commissioner of the Rochester City School District. Nice to see you again.
Great to see you
too.
See you
soon. Ashwin Shah, former board member at Gandhi. Thanks for telling these stories. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much.
Great having you. And from all of us at Connections, thanks for being with us. We're back with you tomorrow on member-supported public media.
This program is a production of WXXI Public Radio. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of this station, its staff, management, or underwriters. The broadcast is meant for the private use of our audience. Any rebroadcast or use in another medium without expressed written consent of WXXI is strictly prohibited. Connections with Evan Dawson is available as a podcast. Just click on the Connections link at WXXInews.org.